Ayan had always been the kind of student most people barely noticed. He wasn't loud, he didn't joke around with the other boys, and he never tried to stand out. He preferred the last seat near the window, where he could look outside whenever things inside the classroom felt too heavy. Ayan liked quiet places and soft moments, and that alone made him different in a school where everyone seemed eager to show off or compete. Most mornings, he walked into the classroom quietly, carrying a worn-out bag that he never replaced, even though its straps were beginning to fray. He didn't mind. He wasn't the type to ask for new things unless absolutely necessary. Keeping his head lowered, he would sit down, adjust his notebooks, and wait for class to start. To many of his classmates, he was simply the quiet kid, the one who rarely spoke unless a teacher asked him to answer something. Some students even thought he was too shy or nervous to do anything that required attention. But none of them knew the world he carried inside him, a world full of passion, discipline, and a beautiful secret he had guarded for years. At home, Ayan spent hours practicing the piano. His father had once bought an old keyboard from a neighbor who was moving away. It wasn't the best, and some keys stuck if he pressed too hard, but Ayan loved it. He taught himself through online videos and old music books he found in second-hand shops. When the house got noisy or crowded, he waited until late at night to practice, sometimes playing soft melodies until his eyes grew heavy. Music was the only place where he didn't feel quiet or invisible. But at school, he didn't let anyone know about it, not because he was ashamed, but because he wasn't sure how people would react. He had seen how classmates teased others for the smallest things. Showing a talent could easily turn into another reason to laugh at someone. Ayan didn't want that. He liked keeping his music safe, close to his heart. One ordinary day, Ayan walked into class and noticed the atmosphere felt different. His classmates were louder, joking and laughing as if something exciting had happened earlier. At the front, their teacher, Mr. Farouk, stood with a tired smile and a cup of tea in his hand. He was the kind of teacher who enjoyed small jokes to lighten the room, especially when students looked sleepy or bored. On the left side of the classroom sat an upright piano, slightly dusty but still in decent condition. It had been placed there months ago when the school received new instruments, but no one used it except the music teacher during weekly lessons. The rest of the time, it stood like a quiet piece of furniture most students ignored. Ayan noticed some students glancing toward the piano with mischievous smiles. He didn't think much of it at first. He opened his notebook and took out a pencil, hoping the day would pass smoothly. Mr. Farouk cleared his throat to bring the class to order. "Everyone settle down," he said with a playful tone that immediately hinted he had something in mind. The class loved when he spoke like that. It usually meant some light-hearted moment was coming. Ayan, still seated near the back, watched quietly. Mr. Farouk looked around the room, pretending to study each face as if searching for something. Then he smiled, a little wider than usual. "You all look half asleep today," he said. "This room needs some energy." The students laughed, agreeing. "Maybe we need some music," he added, glancing toward the piano. Several students whispered excitedly. A few even nudged each other. Ayan felt a small wave of worry wash over him, though he didn't know why. Mr. Farouk continued scanning the classroom, and for a moment, his eyes stopped on Ayan, not because he knew anything about Ayan's secret talent, but simply because teachers often noticed the quiet ones during moments like this. It was easy to pull them into harmless jokes. "How about?" the teacher began, stretching his sentence for suspense. "Ayan, why don't you come and play something for us?" His tone was playful, the kind used when he didn't expect the student to actually do much. The class burst into soft laughter, not cruel laughter, but the kind filled with amusement and surprise. Ayan was the last person anyone expected to touch that piano. and froze. He felt all eyes turn toward him, and suddenly the classroom felt much smaller. His heart began beating faster, not because he was scared of the piano, but because he hated being the center of attention. He took a slow breath. "Sir, I don't," he tried to say, but his voice was too soft. Mr. Farouk waved a hand casually. "Come on, no excuses. It's just for fun. We won't judge. Besides, everyone else has had their turn at some point. Now it's yours." The teacher's smile made it clear. He saw it as nothing more than a harmless push. Ayan lowered his gaze. He didn't want to disrespect the teacher by refusing. Whatever he decided, he needed to stay calm. After a moment, he nodded gently and stood up. The class reacted with whispers and light giggles. Some students leaned forward, eager to see what would happen. They expected Ayan to hit a few random keys awkwardly, or laugh nervously and sit back down. No one imagined anything more. Ayan walked toward the piano slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. His palms felt warm, his throat dry. He wasn't worried about the instrument. He was worried about the room, the attention, the laughter, the expectations. When he reached the piano, he paused and looked at the keys. The surface was slightly dusty, but the familiar pattern of black and white felt comforting. He pulled the bench back gently and sat down behind him. The classroom buzzed with quiet chatter, the kind that happens when people are preparing to see something amusing. Ayan could feel the energy, the curiosity, the anticipation. He took another slow breath and placed his hands on his lap, letting the moment settle. He didn't know what he would do next. He hadn't planned to reveal his talent. He hadn't even imagined being in this situation. Part of him wanted to play something simple, just to satisfy the teacher and walk away. Another part of him, the part that had spent years practicing alone, wanted to show the truth, but he wasn't ready to decide yet. From the back of the room, a student whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "This is going to be funny." A few students chuckled. Ayan heard it, and for a moment, he felt a familiar sting, the kind that came from being underestimated. Over and over again, he placed his fingers gently on the keys. The classroom quieted instantly. For the first time since he entered the room, Ayan realized something important. Everyone expected nothing from him. And sometimes, that kind of freedom made the world feel wide open. He wasn't ready to play yet, but something inside him began to shift, preparing for the moment that would surprise every person watching. And so, with the teacher smiling playfully, the classmates whispering, and the quiet weight of the room settling around him, Ayan sat still at the piano, a breath away from changing everything. Ayan sat at the piano with his fingers lightly resting on the keys, but he still hadn't pressed a single note. The classroom waited, expecting a short, awkward moment that would end with a few laughs. But Ayan stayed still, trying to steady his breathing. He didn't want his hands to shake. He didn't want anyone to notice how nervous he was. Even though almost everyone was already staring at him, the room felt unusually warm. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the number of eyes fixed on him. Or maybe it was simply the weight of the moment. The whispers behind him faded in and out like background noise. He couldn't fully understand. He kept his eyes on the piano keys, trying to find a calm place inside himself. He remembered practicing late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone had fallen asleep. He remembered placing his fingers on the keyboard with confidence, feeling as though the world disappeared when he played. But now, in front of a full classroom, that same confidence was nowhere to be found. Mr. Farouk stood near the board, still smiling. He wasn't trying to embarrass Ayan. He just thought it would be amusing to see the quiet kid try something unexpected. He didn't know the storm of emotions going on inside Ayan's mind. He didn't know how big this moment actually was. "Go on, Ayan," he said gently. Just try something. Anything. We're not expecting a masterpiece. He chuckled lightly. Those words weren't meant to hurt, but they added a bit more pressure. Not expecting a masterpiece. Of course they weren't. Why would they? Ayan had spent years hiding his talent so well that even his closest classmates had no idea. He could play. Ayan pressed a single key softly. A small, uncertain sound echoed through the room. Some students leaned forward, others giggled quietly. See? Someone whispered. He doesn't know what he's doing. Another student added, he looks like he's scared of the piano. More soft laughter followed. Ayan closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't angry, but the comments sank deep, mixing with years of being overlooked. It wasn't that his classmates disliked him. They just didn't really see him. Not fully. Not the way he truly was. He took a breath and lifted his hands off the keys, letting them hover in the air. The classroom quieted again, sensing something was different this time. But Ayan still didn't play. A memory surfaced the first time his father brought home the old keyboard. The excitement, the curiosity, the feeling of discovering something that felt like it belonged to him. He remembered sitting in his small room, tapping random notes until he learned how they worked together. He remembered smiling when he finally played a simple melody that actually sounded like music. That memory brought a small calmness back to him. But he was still unsure. Behind him, one of the boys let out a loud sigh. Sir, maybe he should sit down. He clearly can't play. Let someone else try. Another boy added with a laugh. Yeah, what if he breaks the piano? The room erupted with more laughter. Ayan felt something shift inside him, almost like a quiet voice speaking from deep within. He wasn't angry at them. Not really. He just felt tired. Tired of being the one people didn't expect anything from. Tired of hiding the part of himself that made him feel alive. He looked down at the keys again. The piano wasn't judging him. The piano wasn't expecting anything. The piano had always been the one place where he felt like he belonged. He gently pressed another key, then another. The sounds were soft, scattered, uncertain. But he wasn't trying yet. He was letting himself adjust, letting his fingers remember that they were capable of much more. Come on, Ayan. Don't be scared, a girl said from the front row. Her tone wasn't mean, just amused. Someone else whispered, this is taking forever. Ayan took another deep breath. His mind was racing with questions. Should he play something real? Should he show them what he could actually do? Should he keep his secret hidden like always? But then, unexpectedly, he felt his nervousness slowly melting away. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the fact that everyone in the room seemed convinced he couldn't do anything. Sometimes, having nothing expected from you made it easier to surprise the world. He rested his fingers properly on the keys this time, the way he did at home. His posture changed ever so slightly, and a few students noticed. Wait. Someone whispered. He looks like he knows how to sit at a piano. Nah, another replied. He's just pretending. Ayan inhaled slowly, letting the air settle in his chest. He wasn't ready to play yet, but he knew the decision was coming. He could feel it. Mr. Farouk raised an eyebrow, noticing the change in his posture as well. Something about the way Ayan held his hands didn't look random. It didn't look accidental. It looked practiced. The teacher took a small step forward, curiosity growing behind his smile. Ayan, he said in a quieter voice, do you actually know how to play? Ayan didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the piano. In the back, someone whispered, there's no way. Not him. Ayan felt a small spark inside him, one that had been sleeping for a long time. It wasn't pride. It wasn't anger. It was something simpler, and maybe even deeper. It was the desire to finally be seen. He lowered his hands for a moment and let them rest on his knees. His heartbeat slowed slightly. His breathing became calmer. He glanced at the window and saw the soft light coming in, warming the classroom. Outside, life continued as normal, unaware of the small storm building inside this one room. He looked back at the keys, and for the first time since he sat down, he felt ready. But before he could play, another wave of whispers filled the classroom. "Sir, can we move on? He's not going to do anything. Maybe he's just too shy. Or maybe he's just pretending." Ayan didn't react to any of the comments. His focus was somewhere else now. The noise faded. The laughter faded. The expectations faded. The doubts faded. All that remained was the piano and the quiet space he carried inside himself. He lifted his fingers again, this time with more certainty. The room sensed the shift almost instantly. The air felt different, heavier with anticipation. Ayan still hadn't played anything meaningful yet, but something in the way he held himself made the entire class fall silent. He pressed a few notes slowly, as if testing the piano. The sound was clearer than he expected, warm and rich. He pressed another set of notes, letting them blend together gently. The students, confused, watched him closely. They weren't laughing anymore. They were waiting. For a moment, Ayan paused again. It was the final pause before a choice he knew would change everything. He wasn't sure if he was ready for people to know the truth. But he was tired of hiding. Tired of being seen as less than he was. Tired of being the background character in his own story. He thought about the years of practice. The nights spent playing while everyone slept. The quiet moments that shaped him into someone more than what people saw at school. And then he thought about what he wanted just once to show the world who he really was. The decision formed quietly, but clearly. Ayan lifted his hands, positioned them with confidence, and prepared to play, not because the teacher forced him, not because his classmates expected a joke, but because, deep down, he finally wanted to show them. He wanted to be seen. He wanted this moment to mean something. And he knew, without a doubt, that the next few seconds would change the atmosphere of the room forever. Prank was supposed to be harmless, but it was about to become something else entirely. Ayan took his final calm breath and placed his fingers firmly on the keys, ready for the moment that would soon silence every doubt in the room. The moment Ayan pressed his fingers firmly on the keys, the classroom shifted into a strange, breathless silence. It was the kind of silence that only happened when people sensed something unexpected was about to occur, something they couldn't fully understand yet. Even Ayan felt it. It settled in his chest like a quiet promise. His heart was still racing, but now it wasn't from fear alone. There was something else mixed in, something warm, something brave, something that felt like the beginning of a truth he had kept hidden for too long. He closed his eyes for a brief second, letting his thoughts clear. Then his fingers moved. The first notes were soft, gentle, and smooth, nothing like the shaky taps he had made earlier. They flowed together in a way that made the classroom freeze. A few students blinked in surprise. Someone in the back sat up straighter. A notebook fell off a desk, but no one turned to pick it up. Ayan didn't notice any of it. Once his fingers began to move, the rest of the world faded away. The nervousness, the whispers, the pressure, everything dissolved the moment the music started. He didn't begin with something too bold or dramatic. Instead, he started with a simple melody he had practiced 1,000 times. It was the first piece he ever learned properly, the one he played when he needed comfort. The gentle rise and fall of the notes were like breathing to him. As he played, his fingers found their rhythm effortlessly. Every movement felt natural, as though the piano had been waiting for his touch all along. Each note echoed through the classroom with clarity, filling the space between desks, drifting toward the windows, melting the silence. The students stared, stunned. The whispers disappeared completely. Even the ones who had been laughing earlier were frozen, unable to believe what they were hearing. One girl slowly turned to her friend. "Is that really him?" She whispered. Her friend nodded, eyes wide. I think so." Near the front, a boy who had been smirking before now sat with his mouth slightly open. He leaned forward without realizing it, watching Ayan's hands glide across the keys with ease. Mr. Farouk, who had started this whole moment as a light-hearted prank, no longer had that playful smile on his face. Instead, he stood still, eyebrows raised, completely taken aback. He wasn't expecting this. Not even close. The melody grew stronger as Ayan continued. His hands moved faster now, weaving through beautiful tones that blended into something rich and emotional. His posture straightened, his movements became more confident, and the room seemed to breathe with the music. He played as if he were alone in his small room at home, lost in the world he had built for himself over the years. A world where every key held a memory. Quiet nights, empty hallways, soft lights, and the feeling of discovering beauty in something simple. He didn't rush. He didn't force anything. He just let his heart guide him. As the music grew smoother, something changed in the classroom. The students weren't just surprised anymore. They were moved. They were listening. Truly listening, for many of them. This was the first time they had heard something so real, so heartfelt. In the middle of an ordinary school day, one student whispered, "It sounds like a movie." But even that whisper felt too loud for the moment. Ayan's hands danced across the keys. Sometimes soft, sometimes firm, always controlled. His fingers moved with a mix of discipline and emotion, the perfect balance that only came from years of devotion. He shifted into a slightly more complex section, letting his fingers glide faster, hitting notes that intertwined beautifully. The melody rose, filling the room with energy. A few students leaned back as if overwhelmed by the sudden intensity. Still, Ayan wasn't aware of any of them. He wasn't thinking about the class, or the teacher, or the whispers. His mind was in the music, in the flow, in the quiet confidence that finally burst through the walls he had built around himself. He reached a part of the piece that required more precision, moving his hands in opposite directions. The sound became bold, the rhythm more certain. His movements were fluid, natural, and full of quiet power. Some students exchanged looks of disbelief. Others simply stared, unable to look away. One boy in the back muttered under his breath, "This is unreal." Even he sounded impressed. As Ayan continued, the class no longer saw him as the quiet kid who preferred the back seat. They saw someone who carried something extraordinary inside him, something they had never imagined. Mr. Farouk, still speechless, stepped closer to the piano, wanting a better look at the hands moving so gracefully. He had once taught many students with talent, but something about the way Ayan played felt raw and natural. It wasn't just skill. It was emotion, depth, honesty. Ayan played the next part with soft, delicate touches, letting the melody wander gently. The room softened with it. The air felt warmer, calmer. Even the students' expressions relaxed, as though the music reached something inside them. Some remembered moments from their own lives. Some felt emotional without understanding why. Music had a way of bringing hidden feelings to the surface. After a minute, Ayan transitioned into the final section. This was his favorite part, the part where everything came together, where the melody opened up beautifully and then settled into a peaceful ending. He lifted his hands, paused for a second, and delivered the closing notes with the same grace he used when practicing alone. The final chord echoed gently across the room, ringing softly before fading into silence. And just like that, it was over. But the silence that followed didn't feel like the silence before the music began. This silence was full of shock, full of emotion, full of something new that no one was prepared for. Heian slowly lifted his hands from the keys. He didn't turn around right away. He needed a moment to breathe, to let his heart settle. His fingers trembled not from fear, but from the intensity of the performance. He finally looked up and turned his head slightly, expecting to see confused faces or uncertain reactions. But what he saw stunned him. Every single student was staring at him, not with amusement or pity or boredom, but with pure disbelief. Some had wide eyes. Some had parted lips. Some looked as though they were seeing him for the first time. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one moved. It was like the room had forgotten how to react. Heian sat there, unsure of what to do next. His breathing was still uneven as he tried to process what had just happened. Then, slowly, someone in the front row lifted their hands and began to clap. The sound was soft at first. A single pair of hands applauding in a quiet room. Then another student joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into applause, loud, enthusiastic, genuine applause. Students who rarely agreed on anything were suddenly unified in one reaction. Some clapped with wide smiles. Some clapped with disbelief still written on their faces. A few looked emotional, touched by the unexpected beauty they had just experienced. Aian's eyes widened. He didn't expect this. Not even close. He thought they would laugh, or tease him, or stare awkwardly until the teacher told him to sit down. He never imagined this. Mr. Farouk clapped louder than anyone, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Aian," he said with a voice full of amazement. That was incredible. Truly incredible. Aian felt warmth spread through his chest. Not pride, exactly something softer. Something like relief. Something like being understood for the first time. He stood slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. As he stepped away from the piano, the applause continued. Some students even tapped their desks, cheering lightly. Aian didn't know where to look. His face warmed, but not from embarrassment. From something he had never felt in school recognition. For the first time, they saw him. Not the quiet kid. Not the background student. Not the boy who blended into the last row. They saw the person he truly was. And as the applause echoed around him, Aian realized that a single moment, one he never expected, had changed everything. The morning sun rose gently, but it brought a heavy kind of silence with it, the kind that made every small sound feel louder. She woke up with a restless feeling in her chest, something she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't fear exactly, but more like the weight of something unfinished. She lay still for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts, but they scattered like small birds every time she reached for one. After taking a slow breath, she pushed herself up and sat at the edge of the bed. She knew that her performance had sparked something bigger than she expected. People were talking, more people than she ever imagined. The standing ovation wasn't just applause anymore. It had become a story that traveled from one person to another, transforming a quiet moment of courage into something almost unbelievable. But with every new voice praising her, she felt this strange pressure rising, like everyone now expected the same magic every time she touched the piano. She stood near the window and looked outside. The street was calm, ordinary, not touched by any of the excitement she was dealing with inside. She wished she could borrow some of that calmness, just enough to settle her mind. But the day wasn't waiting for her to sort out her feelings. After getting dressed, she stepped into the small living room, where her old piano waited. It wasn't fancy, and sometimes a few keys needed a gentle push to behave, but it was hers. She sat down slowly, rested her fingers on the cool surface of the keys, and let her hands relax. Normally, she would start playing something soft to warm herself up, something that didn't demand much thought. But today, she couldn't get herself to start. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Unsure dot, she sighed softly and leaned back. "Why am I feeling like this?" she whispered to herself. It wasn't like her. Music usually flowed from her without effort, like water finding its way. But now, it felt like she was trying to lift something heavy. Dot. The memory of the standing ovation filled her mind again. Not the sound of it, but the faces. The way people stood so quickly. The way some looked surprised. The way a few even teared up. She didn't understand why her playing caused such a reaction. She didn't think she was someone special. She just played with her heart, the only way she knew how. But today, thinking of that moment made her chest tighten instead of inspiring her. She stood up from the piano and walked to the kitchen to make tea. Maybe a warm cup would help clear her thoughts. As she waited for the water to boil, she rested her hands on the counter, feeling the coolness beneath her palms. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the quietness settle. When her tea was ready, she carried it back to the living room and sat on the floor near the piano. She took slow sips, letting the warmth move through her. She tried to remind herself why she started playing in the first place. It was never for attention. It was never about impressing anyone. It was about expression, about releasing what words couldn't hold. She finished her tea and placed the empty cup aside. This time, when she sat at the piano, she didn't think about the audience or the applause or what anyone expected. She told herself to focus on the sound, the feeling, the softness in the notes. She pressed the first key gently, and the sound echoed softly in the room. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. She played another note, then another, slowly building a delicate melody. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breath steadied. Her mind quieted. The music didn't need to be impressive right now. It just needed to be real. An hour passed without her noticing. The melody grew richer, warmer, and it carried something new, something she hadn't felt before. It wasn't the same magic from the performance night. This was something calmer, deeper. She finished playing and sat still, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Maybe she didn't need to chase that powerful moment from before. Maybe she just needed to let music be what it always had been for her. Just then, there was a soft knock at the door. She blinked, surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone. She wiped her hands on her clothes and walked over to open it. Standing outside was a young girl from her building, holding a small notebook. The girl looked shy, almost nervous. She offered a tiny smile and said, "I'm sorry to bother you. I heard you playing again. I hope that's okay." The woman smiled gently. "It's completely fine. Did you need something?" The girl hesitated, clutching the notebook close to her chest. "I wanted to ask, could you maybe teach me one day? Not today or anything. Just sometime. I like how you play. It makes me feel like I can learn too." The woman felt something warm spread through her chest. She didn't expect her playing to inspire someone so young. She nodded slowly, smiling softly. "Yes, I'd like that. We can start whenever you want." The girl's face lit up, and she thanked her before hurrying back down the hallway. After closing the door, the woman leaned against it to let out a soft breath. That small moment changed something inside her. It reminded her that music wasn't only for big crowds or dramatic moments. It touched people quietly too, one person at a time. She went back to the piano and placed her hands on the keys again. This time, the hesitation was gone. She played gently, thinking about how many ways music could reach people, how it didn't always need to be loud or grand. As she played, she felt grateful. Not for the applause, but for the connection, the way music tied people together without needing a single spoken word. It felt real again. It felt like hers. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. The warm orange light filled the room, casting soft shadows on the floor. She stopped playing and rested her head lightly against the piano. She felt tired, but it was the good kind of tired, like she had finally let go of the weight she had been carrying since the performance night. She stood up and stretched her arms. The room felt lighter now. She walked back to the window and watched the sky turn from orange to a deep blue. She didn't know what would come next. Maybe more people would talk about her performance. Maybe more expectations would come. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had learned something important today. She didn't need to match any moment from her past. She didn't need to chase perfection or repeat magic. She just needed to stay true to her heart and let the music move the way it wanted to. And that was enough. She smiled to herself, feeling a calm confidence she hadn't felt before. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, she had found her center again. She had found the simple joy that started it all. She turned off the lights and headed to bed, the soft memory of her day's quiet melodies still lingering in her mind. And for the first time since the standing ovation, she slept with peace in her heart, ready for whatever the next step of her journey would be. The news about his performance spread through the school faster than he ever imagined. By the next morning, people he had never spoken to were looking at him differently. Some smiled at him in the hallway. Others whispered to their friends while glancing his way. It felt strange, almost unreal, as if he had stepped into someone else's life. But beneath all the attention, he still felt like a sane person, quiet, unsure, and hoping this sudden interest wouldn't fade as quickly as it came. When he entered the classroom, a few students clapped jokingly, though the tone was kind rather than mocking. One of the boys said, "Man, you didn't tell us you could do all that." Another added, "You should have played ages ago." He only smiled shyly. Compliments were new to him, and he didn't really know how to respond. But something about this moment felt lighter than usual, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally been lifted. The teacher arrived a few minutes later, acting normal at first. But after putting his bag down, he looked at the boy and said quietly, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" The class went silent, as if expecting a serious conversation. They stepped outside into the hallway. The teacher seemed uncomfortable, almost awkward, like someone who had rehearsed a speech and didn't know how to begin. "Listen," he started, "about yesterday. I didn't realize you had that kind of talent. I didn't mean to embarrass you. It was not my intention to put you under pressure like that." His voice was sincere, and for a moment he seemed more like a friend than a figure of authority. The student shook his head. "It's okay," he said softly. "I didn't mind, actually. I'm glad it happened." And he meant it. Even though he had been nervous at the start, he felt grateful now. The teacher nodded slowly. "Still, I should have handled it differently. But I'm proud of you. Truly proud. You surprised everyone, including me." A warm feeling spread through the student's chest. He wasn't used to hearing such words, especially from adults. It felt good, unexpected, but good. Later that day, during lunch, a group of students approached his table. Normally he sat alone, but now they stood around him, smiling in a way that felt welcoming rather than intimidating. "We're planning something for the school's cultural week," one of the girls said. "We were thinking maybe you could play. It doesn't have to be long. Even a short performance would be great." He blinked in surprise. He had never been invited to participate in anything before. The thought of performing again scared him a little, but he also felt a small spark of excitement. "I'll think about it," he replied. "You should do it," another student said. "Seriously, people would love it." When they left, he sat quietly for a while. He didn't want to disappoint anyone, but he also didn't want to rush into something he wasn't ready for. Still, the idea felt meaningful. Maybe this was a chance for him to grow. That afternoon, he went home and sat at the old piano in the living room. The keys were worn, some slightly chipped, but he loved them. They felt familiar, comforting. As his fingers moved gently over the keyboard, he felt the same calmness he had always felt when playing alone. He practiced for hours, not because anyone asked him to, but because he wanted to. He wanted to be better not for applause, not for attention, but because music made him feel alive in a way nothing else did. Over the next few days, the excitement at school didn't fade. Students still talked about his performance, and some even asked him when he would play again. Each comment made him feel a little more confident, a little more seen. One afternoon, the teacher made an announcement. The school was holding a small talent showcase as part of the cultural week. Students could perform music, dance, poetry, anything they wanted. When he heard this, he felt his chest tighten. This was real now. Later, the teacher approached him once again. "I think you should join," he said gently. "No pressure, but I believe it would be good for you." The teacher's tone was calm and sincere. He wasn't pushing, just encouraging. The student thought about it that night. He remembered how he felt when he played in front of the class, nervous at first, then strangely free. He remembered the applause, the surprised faces, the sudden respect. And he remembered the feeling in his own heart, a feeling of pride he hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, he told the teacher, "I'll do it." The teacher smiled in relief. "You made the right choice." In the days that followed, the student prepared carefully. He spent long evenings practicing, polishing each part of the piece he wanted to play. He didn't want perfection. He wanted honesty, something that came from his heart. When the day of the showcase arrived, the school's assembly hall was filled with students and teachers. The lights were bright, and the stage looked bigger than he remembered. His hands trembled slightly as he took a seat at the piano, but then he took a deep breath. He looked at the crowd faces he had once avoided, now watching him with genuine interest. And suddenly, the fear melted away. He placed his fingers on the keys, and the music began. The sound echoed through the hall, soft at first, then growing stronger. His confidence grew with each note. The melody flowed naturally, beautifully, as if the piano itself was telling his story. The story of someone who had been quiet for too long. By the time he finished, the hall was filled with silence. Not the awkward silence of confusion, but the deep, peaceful silence of people who had been moved. Then the applause came. It wasn't wild or chaotic. It was warm, steady, and heartfelt. Teachers nodded in approval. Students clapped with genuine admiration. Some looked amazed, others proud. He stood slowly, unsure of what to do, but smiling softly. He wasn't the quiet kid in the back anymore. He wasn't the student the teacher had chosen as a prank. He wasn't someone hiding his talents in the shadows. He was someone who finally let himself be seen. As he walked off the stage, he felt lighter than he had in years. The teacher patted his shoulder gently. "Well done," he said. The student looked back at the piano, then at the crowd, and realized something important. This was only the beginning. There was so much more he could become if he believed in himself. And for the first time in his life, he truly did.